Right now, countries around the entire world, including, of course, the United States, are at somewhat of a crossroads. Because you see, on the one hand, we have organizations like the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, both of which, by the way, recently had meetings over in Switzerland, and they are pushing the elites across the entire globe to consolidate power, remold society according to their visions, and express more authority from the top down. However, at the very same time, simultaneously to this, we are seeing populist movements rising up in countries everywhere, such as in the US, Canada, France, Australia, Hungary, Great Britain, and so on, with people in all those different countries working to reclaim their own national sovereignty apart from these international organizations and the elites who rule them. And so, amidst this backdrop, we got a chance to speak with Ms. Cheryl Chumley, who has been researching this very topic, and she has published two very relevant books, Police State USA, as well as Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. And during our discussion, she laid out the specifics of how the Great Reset agenda is being implemented right here in America. Take a listen. Can you give a brief primer to the people who are watching this interview? Maybe they're not familiar with what the World Economic Forum is. Can you explain to them what it is as an organization?
Well, the World Economic Forum is basically just a collaboration of some of the world's wealthiest and most elite. It's a public-private partnership of governments with, say, bankers or world financiers and some of the richest. And one of their Great Reset agendas is to, say, in America, change the definition of capitalism. So instead of being in business in America to make money for your shareholders, you will be in business, say, again, in America to make your stakeholders happy. And stakeholders are designed as anyone from environmentalists to Black Lives Matter to whatever other social justice cause that the left wants to push forth. So the World Economic Forum is at the top of changing economies by changing the definition of capitalism and free markets.
And how successful do you believe they actually are? Because there are, there's conspiracy theories and then there's conspiracy facts, right? And so, for instance, there was a very famous clip that went viral not too long ago of it was an onstage meeting at the World Economic Forum, and they were clearly saying that, hey, we have people in the Trudeau cabinet, we have people in Argentina, we have people in the administrations of all these different countries. How successful have they been at pushing their agenda?
I'm going to have to say, sadly, very successful, in part because many Americans in particular aren't aware of this Great Reset agenda and what it will do for America in terms of crippling the Constitution and crumbling American freedoms. But also because when you do bring up things that the World Economic Forum wants to push, you get slammed as a conspiracy theorist. And part of the reason I wrote Lockdown was to point to the evil genius of these globalists bringing their agendas mainstream. It's not just that the World Economic Forum, for example, puts out a Great Reset and lists on its own website how it will do it. It's that it then carries it out by bringing in all these partners, so the tentacles of the World Economic Forum isn't just a singular source. It just grows out. For instance, if you're in business in America, maybe you're aware of the Great Reset and you don't want to participate. Well, you may opt out, but the bank that loans you money may not, or the insurance company that insures your business may not. So in order to get your loan or to continue insuring your business, you're going to have to produce paperwork that shows how X amount of your business dollars are going to be funneled into social justice causes in order to stay afloat. So the tentacles are more than just one source, and that's the problem most people aren't aware of.
My next question, but you seem to answer it, which was, how does this kind of multinational globalist meeting translate to actual action on the ground floor? And you're saying they control, let's say, the insurance companies and the banking institutions. They then implement specific policies that the individual business owners and then ergo the actual people of the country then have to follow. So is that kind of how it works?
Yes, you don't need every business getting along, right, or going along with this. And you don't need every government level, every government agency going along. You only need a select few. And there comes a time where it becomes impossible to compete in a market that's become dominated by those who are pushing a social justice agenda over a free market profit loss agenda.
So there seems to be a real juxtaposition between the rhetoric of redistribution of wealth and maybe some of the tax codes that have been put into place and what's been taking place over the past years with the pandemic, because there was a report that was put out by Oxfam just last week, and it was on wealth inequality, and it showed that during the pandemic, there were 537 billionaires, new billionaires that became billionaires, while at the same time there were 260 million people that were pushed into extreme poverty with things like lockdowns, the high inflation, problems with the food supply, et cetera, leading some of that charge. What do you make of that exactly? Do you think that's an accident of policy, or do you think there's some premeditation to that? What do you make of this disparity?
Well, I actually think it's both. I think it's an accident of policy by those who actually are in government because they think that government is a force for good for those who have least in society. But I also think it's an actual strategy of those at the top, those who are trying to move the world toward this collectivism and this Marxism. And it's basically the decimation in America in particular of the middle class, of the small business, which is really the engine of America's great economy. Not only does it really bolster the U.S. economy, the small business class, but it also gives those younger, right? It gives those maybe in high school or those who don't go through the traditional 4 years of college, the idea that in this country they can become anything. You can become an entrepreneur overnight. You can own your own destiny through your own business and make your own money. And you don't have to rely on government handouts, government stimulus like we saw under the coronavirus. So insofar as that is a strategy of the globalist elites, they want to decimate the middle class to make everybody poverty stricken, so then they become dependent on the government, on the big government, on themselves to provide.
In terms of lockdowns, it was naturally the fear of COVID that drove people to accept them, right? Because otherwise, people might not have accepted them, but because there was so much fear going on at the time, they did. So COVID is naturally becoming endemic. Even the FDA recently came out and said, like, hey, we should treat it as the flu. We should even have the vaccines sort of go to a flu model. But now we're seeing the rise of this monkeypox, right? Suddenly, just as COVID's going away, you have the rise of monkeypox. What do you make of that? And how do you think we as the populace should balance seeing things as potential threats that could, let's say, explode, going from like 12 cases to 24 to 100, to 1,000, et cetera, versus seeing the code in the matrix that people might be using this to spread fear and therefore spread more authoritarian rules?
Well, I go into this in great depth in lockdown because, of course, that is the bigger theme, right? How do you tell the difference between government strategizing to take away your civil liberties between something that is really a health hazard? You need to protect yourself. And in America, one big thing is individual choice. It never should come time in America where a bureaucrat like Anthony Fauci, or worse, a Microsoft business owner like Bill Gates, is able to take policy, claim they're not taking policy, and shove it down the throats of American citizens. Because all along we've been guided by supposedly the best sound science of Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates, but yet that same science kept flipping and flopping on a daily basis. So anytime the government uses a medical or health bureaucracy to dictate to people what they can and cannot do, that should raise the red flag where Americans say no more, because it's our right as individual citizens born into a country with our rights coming from God that we should have the final say and determination over our own health choices.
However, it seems like things are moving in the opposite direction from a certain perspective. Even the Biden administration last week, they suggested several amendments to the WHO's binding regulations, and they're going to vote on it this week, also in Switzerland. Among the regulations that they're considering adopting would be that the WHO can enact a health emergency in any country that they so choose, regardless of the facts that come from that country's own government. So what do you make of that fact, and what can the citizens in the world actually do to fight back against this kind of globalist tyranny?
Well, what I make of that fact is it's abysmal. And I actually predicted that this is where this pandemic was going to lead. In April of 2020, I wrote a piece in the Washington Times that said the coronavirus would go down in history as the biggest political hoax of all time. And here we are. And so now we're facing this uncomfortable truth that it's not just our own government within our own boundaries that we're going to be fighting. So it brings it beyond just the next election, right? It's a global force. It's the World Health Organization. And you know what's going to happen, that Joe Biden, who just continued in March our emergency health declaration for a mysterious reason, because there is no emergency health declaration or situation with this current coronavirus, but it's going to put it in the hands of the World Health Organization to declare. And our administration presently will go along with this and justify further clampdowns. So the only thing Americans can do is to recognize that there is no such thing as a pre-pandemic normalcy. The left is not going to let that happen. So you have to decide, are you going to give up your civil liberties, or are you going to fight for them? And if you're going to fight for them, I can tell you it's going to be uncomfortable, because for 2 years, American citizens just dried up and let the government tell us what to do. And it's only going to make it more uncomfortable going forward to fight. But it's either fight or lose your individual liberties. That's the choice.
Now, I'd like to mention that what we just watched was only part of the interview. And if you'd like to watch the interview in its entirety, you can do so over on epoktv, which is our awesome no censorship video platform. I'll throw a link to it. It'll be right there at the very top of the description box. And also, it's worth mentioning that besides this interview, I publish at least 2 exclusive episodes of Facts Matter over on epoktv every single week. These are episodes that you cannot find here on YouTube for, well, you can say obvious reasons. And so again, if you'd like to check it out, the link will be right there at the very top of the description box. And I'll also mention that now is a great time to try epoktv if you've been a bit on the fence, because we are running an Independence Day special. And so you can celebrate the 4th of July by declaring your independence from big tech censorship by trying epoktv by clicking on that link at the very top of the description box. Then, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.